Let's talk about boundaries. So first I want to say that if you put the work in and you develop the skill, that it will change your relationships because healthy boundaries are the foundation to a healthy relationship. They're amazing. They'll change your life. Okay, so what is a boundary? A boundary is an identifiable point where my responsibility ends and another person's begins. This lets people know how I will allow them to treat me. It'll just sets the standard of what I will and won't allow to happen in my life. And I'm going to pause here for a second and say, we teach other people how to treat us by what we allow them to do to us. Okay, remember that. We teach other people how to treat us by what we allow them to do to us and how we allow them to speak to us, okay? So, an example of a boundary in my own life is that whenever I'm having a conversation or an argument with someone and it starts to get heated and they maybe start yelling or name calling or something like that, I am all about tone and I will not allow someone to talk down to me or yell at me or call me names. We're not going to do that. So, the way I communicate that boundary is I say, hey, I noticed that this conversation is starting to get heated. We're getting pretty close to a point where we may say some things that could be hurtful to the other person, and I don't want that to happen. And I'm gonna stop the conversation. I'm not gonna keep talking to you. And whenever we can both come back cool, calm, and collected and speak to each other respectfully, then I will continue the conversation. But for now, I'm gonna have to stop it. So that's one boundary. Another example of a boundary is with my stepdad. My stepdad is an alcoholic, and he commonly, regularly says very, very hurtful things. And about a year ago, he actually messaged me. I think it was a message. He messaged me and he was berating me, taking out some anger that he had towards my mother on me in his drunken state. And I just made it clear, like, hey, just so you know, it's not okay for you to speak to me that way. Whenever you're sober, we're going to talk about this. Done. Didn't respond anymore. He had a lot more to say. I did not respond anymore. I blocked him. And then I spoke to him later on when he was sober and I said, hey, just so you know, the way that you spoke to me that day and the way that you've been speaking to me, that's not acceptable. And I'm not going to put up with that anymore. So I want you to know that if it happens again, or if you call me when you are not sober, that we will not speak again until you've reached a minimum of 1 year sobriety. So I want to be clear that this is my expectation. And like 2 weeks later, I don't know, it was like a very short amount of time later, he did it again. He called me and he was drunk and he was being a real jerk and saying hurtful things. And I stopped the conversation and I said, hey, you remember those boundaries we talked about and how I won't tolerate you speaking to me this way? You're doing it. So at this point, I'm going to end the conversation, and whenever you can be sober, then we can talk. But my expectation is that you don't speak to me again until you are at least 1 year sober. I wish you the best. I love you. Goodbye. Click. Done. I haven't spoken to him since. There's been a couple of times when I've talked to my mom and he's been around, and just because of where he was, we had a very limited interaction. But he knows. And he knows that I'm not going to tolerate speaking to him or being spoken to in the way that he was speaking to me anymore, because I set my expectation. I made it very clear how I will and will not be treated. And I held firm to that. He did attempt talking to me several times, but I didn't respond. And I didn't do that because I'm holding firm to my boundary. And that's a very important part of boundaries is it's one thing to set them. It's another thing to honor them. You have to honor your boundary. You have to do it. They may not always do it, but you have to do it. And before I go on to another example, I want to say that boundaries don't always feel good to set, and they definitely don't feel good to hear. And whenever you set them, you may get nervous, you may get some butterflies, maybe you're like really anxious, you get a little sweaty. It's fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to do okay. Okay? They may get upset, and the reason that they get upset is because when you're setting a boundary, you're letting them know that they crossed a line with you, that they're doing something to you or treating you in a way that is not acceptable. So boundaries can be hard to hear, okay? But in setting that boundary, as uncomfortable as it can be, is so healthy and so good for you. It's gonna lead to happier life and healthier relationships, okay? So I really hope you hear that. Another example of a boundary is being able to say no to some things so that we can say yes to other things. So whenever I'm thinking in my own life, like I'm in that little kid stage where I'm invited to every single person I know's birthday parties, but for my kids, right? I don't have time for that. I want time with my kids where we can veg out on the couch and watch whatever cartoon or whatever kid movie they want to watch, where I can play games with them and go on walks and go to the park. I don't want to spend all of my time at other kids' birthday parties. I love the kids. I love my friends' kids, but I'm going to say no to a lot of their parties because my one-on-one time with my kids is more important to me. I want to invest in my relationship with my children and with my husband more than I want to go to that party. So I will say no. And if you want to go to the party, you go to the party, okay? This is for me. I will say no to driving an hour to someone's birthday party and spending several hours there and driving an hour back because I want more time with my children. We have packed schedules. We're very busy. So that time together, any opportunity that we can have that time together is very important, and I guard that. I think that, and I want to go back to setting boundaries with people in your lives. You only have one life. I'm silly. When we set boundaries, sometimes I'm thinking in my marriage, and like when I set boundaries that aren't so severe like I did with my stepdad, like with my husband. I've had this conversation with him in the past where, smartphones, they're like such a problem, okay? And so we can be having a conversation. It's not even a serious conversation. It could be me talking to him about my day, and he would be there playing video games on his phone while I'm speaking to him. And I felt so disrespected by that. So I told him, I just said, hey babe, whenever you're on your phone while I'm talking to you, it makes me feel like you're not listening and you don't respect me. And then that gives him an opportunity to see what the violation is and how I feel about that violation. And then we get to choose how to respond to it. So his response to me saying that is, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I'm so sorry that that's the way that you took this behavior. I'm sorry that was your interpretation. I do respect you. What you're saying is important. Let me put my phone away. So now whenever I'm having conversations with my husband, he puts his phone away. Like, he knows that he needs to put his phone away when he speaks to me. I don't care how intense the game is that he's playing. He'll put his phone away when he talks to me. And that was really important in our relationship. I set the boundary and he honored the boundary and he heard it. And he wouldn't have known how the action made me feel if I didn't tell him. So we can set those up in healthy ways that are easy to receive. It doesn't have to be super aggressive or anything like that, but just being able to say, hey, just so you know, when this happens, I feel this. What can we do differently? You could do it that way too. All right, I think that's all I have. If you want to dive into boundaries further, there's a book called Boundaries. There's a whole study on them, and they're amazing and they're so good. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me. And if I don't know the answer, I know a lot of counselors who probably do. All right, I wish you the best. I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.